All right, is renting better than owning? Or is owning better than renting? Well, in this video, I'm gonna break down exactly what the numbers look like so we can actually put this potential debate to rest. Let's find out which is actually better in the long term. So let's check it out. Hey, before we jump into these numbers, I want to let you guys know I shortened the video up a bit because I started off telling you what the initial things are going to be required of you for renting and owning, and then the costs to get into a rental property and or buying a property. So I'm going to exclude that, but I'm going to summarize it real quick. Renting, you've got your deposits and you got your first month's rent. That we're going to say is $2,000 a month, and your deposits are going to end up accumulating to about $2,800. So in all total, $4,800 for entry into a rental property. Okay, with that said, if I didn't say it already, $2,000 in rent, $2,000 mortgage payment. So we're kind of comparing apples to apples in the initial month-to-month cost. Okay, with that said, owning a property, the initial entry cost, you got down payment, you've got closing costs. Well, if we're going to purchase, for this example, a $400,000 property, and you're going to go FHA, which only requires a minimum down payment of 3.5%, that's going to put us at about $14,000 down payment. And then you've got closing costs on top of that. That's going to be about 2 to 2.5% of the purchase price. So with that said, that's about $8,000. So if you add those two together, you're now sitting at about $22,000 as far as getting into a property. So initially, just off the line, renting is much more affordable in its initial entry cost. So let's see how this all plays out. So let's dive into the numbers. Renting first, then we're going to get into owning. Because this is the stuff that's going to end up saying, I want to remain as a tenant, or I want to actually look into purchasing a property if you're not already there. All right, now let's get into this. So usually if you're looking to rent a property, you're looking at a year lease. Okay, with a year lease, you're looking at the amount that you're going to pay per month times 12. So if you're going to pay $2,000 a month times 12, you're looking at $24,000. If that's not shocking enough, wait till we get a little bit further into a couple of years into this. But $24,000 for the very first year, that is just the rent. Now, you had your deposits. In this scenario is $2,800. So at the end of 12 months, you pay $24,000 plus the 28. Now, that all comes to $26,800. Now, with that said, if you were to take just the rent you pay per month and extrapolate that out over 3 years, so $24,000, roughly you're going to pay how much? $72,000. That is a grip of cash. Now, if you're not like blown out of your seat already, maybe you've already done these numbers. But for those of you who haven't, yes, every single year this amount accumulates. So keep this in mind when contemplating renting a property. But with that said, understand that your rent will and probably most likely is going to end up increasing. Now, that may not be every single year, but consider that every time you do a rental renewal, a lease renewal, you're going to end up having probably a rental increase at roughly around 5%. Now, if we're paying, $2,000 a month and you had a 5% increase, that's going to end up increasing your rent by $100. So after the first year, your rent's going to go from $2,000 to $2,100. What does that look like over a year's time? $25,200. So you pay $24,000 the first year. Now the second year with an increase, you're looking at $25,200. Okay, now if we extrapolate this out to 3 years, you've got $2,100, another 5% increase. You're looking at a little over $2,200 for the second or the third year's monthly rent for a total of $26,460. If you were to add all of this together, what are we looking at? We're looking at $75,660. That's a grip of cash after 3 years. Now, after 3 years, how much of this as a renter or a tenant do you get back? A lot of you are probably already, yelling this out, but it's nothing as a tenant, you're exchanging this amount of money for possession of the property, and that's it. You're paying for a place to stay. That's what happens when you're renting. Now, out of that $75,000 that you paid the tenant, or you ends up receiving $0. Now, what about those deposits? That's totally dependent upon how you end up leaving the property and whether or not those deposits are even refundable at all. Now, you may end up getting some of these back. You may get all of them back. But in this scenario, we're going to say you get that back. So $2,800 back after the first year, second year, third year, however long you're there. But that's totally dependent upon you and the terms that you are written up in your lease. Okay, let's jump over to the owner side, because at least for right now, it's just like, wow, renting looked like great at the beginning. And now it's like, wow, over the course of year after year after year, this is getting expensive. What does it look like on the owner's side? All right, let's check this out. You have a mortgage payment due every month. Okay. In a year's time, at $2,000 a month mortgage payment, you're looking at $24,000, just like we did on the rental side. But the breakdown of this payment might surprise you. Every single time you make a payment, a portion of that, about 25%, ends up going towards what's called principal. That's the principal is the amount you owe the bank, like your balance. So with that, every time you make a monthly payment, a mortgage payment, about 25% of that goes to pay that down. Well, the difference between what your property is worth, say $400,000, because we bought it for $400,000, and the principal amount that you owe. So you got your down payment, right? And then every time you make a payment, that goes down. Payment, 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 payment. The difference between this and this is your equity. Hugely important, hugely important. So if you're paying $2,000 a month in mortgage payment, a quarter of that goes towards principal or your equity. Imagine that amount of money goes into a bank account, a savings account called 123 Main Street, whatever your property address is. Understand, every time you make a payment, that is going into that account. Okay. Just think about it that way, because it's important to think about it that way. So if you had $500 every time you made a payment for the first year, that equates to $6,000. $6,000. This is huge. Okay. So you just deposited $6,000 in 123 Main Street. All right. Or in a sense, the equity that you built up in that first year. Okay, with that, you paid $24,000 out because you made a mortgage payment of $2,000 every month, similar to the tenant paying their rent of $2,000 every month. But the difference is that you ended up, quote unquote, depositing or building equity of $6,000 because of that 500 every single month times 12. Okay, so your actual cost, money you won't receive back, is equivalent to $18,000 towards your interest, taxes, and insurance. Okay, now the cost of that $18,000 per year times 3 ends up equating to $54,000. That's a lot less than the $72,000 or the $75,000 that we ended up equating as a tenant. So right there, things are really beginning to change here with the numbers, right? Okay, now after 3 years, how much will you get back as a homeowner? Well, the homeowner does end up, in fact, getting money back, because even though it may not be a check in your pocket, it's money via equity built up from your payments and, various other ways in which you're going to build equity. But we're going to get into that. Okay, so with that said, what is the amount that is going into this 123 Main Street savings account? Well, if it's $6,000 over 3 years, that's $18,000. That's pretty darn good, right? But this is not all of it, okay? There was other ways in which I said you were going to build equity, and I'm going to go over that right now. A homeowner also benefits from the increase of their property value over time. What does that look like on a $400,000 property? Since that's what we're equating, this is what we have, right? $400,000, the average or typical increase per year on a given property over a period of time is going to be about 5%. So 5% times $400,000 in built-in equity, your property value going up is going to be $20,000 in 1 year. In 1 year, because this 5% is per year. So what does that look like over 3 years? Well, $20,000 worth of increased property value times 3 years is 60 grand. 60 grand. This is mind blowing. Like, holy cow, this is really starting to add up, right? Okay, so you built up 60 grand and you're just your property value going up. Now you also paid your principal balance down, which remember how we were talking about? Okay, so for 3 years, you built up $18,000 worth of equity just by making your payment, plus your property value going up 5% per year, which equates to about 60,000. So you add all this together, what are you at? $78,000, $78,000. This is huge. This is huge. This is the difference. So if we're comparing where we were as a tenant and where we are as a homeowner, where do you think you might want to be? Yeah, let's kind of wrap this up here real quick. So as a tenant, you're paying $2,000 a month or $24,000 in a year's time. As a tenant, you're receiving none of this money back, none of that money back. So the total cost being a tenant per year, $2,000 a month is what? $24,000 a year. Okay, we've got that established. What does this look like if we break this down, concluding all of this for a homeowner? Well, you too are paying $2,000 a month in mortgage payment or $24,000 in a year. But remember, you end up getting $500 or 25% potentially, give or take, of that mortgage payment per month back to you. Now, with the increase in equity because your property value went up, if you were to divide that 20 grand, because 5%, $40,000, 20 grand of equity built and just value increase, increasing, what does that look like per month? Well, that's $1,666. If you add that with the 500 for every payment you make, plus the increase of value, you add that together, what are we looking at? Over $2,100. Remember, your payment was $2,000. So if we kind of do the math here, if you're paying out $2,000, but you're receiving and built-in equity built up over time of $2,100, how much do you pay? $0. $0. Now, that may not be the case every single year, but I'd rather pay zero to close to zero as a homeowner rather than $2,000 every single month. So with that said, homeowner potentially will end up paying nothing if you equate for the equity built up over time. All right. This is absolutely huge. Now, I'm hoping that all of this literally is a wake-up call for those of you who are contemplating continue to rent, or you're looking to jump into renting a property. Now, understand, I get it that, hey, being a tenant or renting has its purposes. It has its necessities. You as an individual need a place to stay, and you don't have the money to be able to plunk down $22,000 to, initially buy a property. But as a licensed real estate agent for over 10 years, I'm well aware of all these things that are required of you and ways of being able to get assistance that could get you into a property via down payment assistance programs, via provided by your state or some other, institution. Not only that, but there are ways to be able to get the seller to contribute towards your closing costs. So that right there may be another benefit to you of realizing that, hey, I don't have to pony up so much money in order to try to get into home ownership. All of your questions pertaining to all of this, the process, how all of this works, everything, please end up reaching out to me. I'm more than happy to go over all of this in detail with you. But with that said, I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Again, now, if you're a seller and you're looking to purchase or sell your property, please reach out to me. There's ways that I'm going to save you thousands and thousands of dollars. All of that equity I talked about, it's better that it stays in your pocket. All right. You guys worked hard to make those payments. Keep that money. Other real estate agents are going to try and rip you off by charging you a high commission. I'm not going to do that. Okay. But with all of that said, I hope that you guys enjoyed all of this information. It was extremely important to stay through the entire duration of the video. And I appreciate the fact that you did. So again, if you have any questions, reach out to me. Otherwise, I will see you guys in the next video.